Howdy, everyone. Welcome back to From Campus to Corporate. I'm your host, Jacoby, and today I am joined with...
Anibeth Turcios. I am an alumni of University of Houston downtown with my MBA in logistics, and then I'm also the Deputy Director of Greater Northside Management District.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Anibeth. It is a pleasure to have you. Yes, you are the Deputy Director for Greater Northside Management District, and we're going to jump into what that truly means in just a moment. But before we do, I'm curious, what is it like to be back here at the University of Houston downtown campus again? Because you were just here for the ring ceremony, if I remember correctly. Can you dig into that for us a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a reminiscing, walking down the halls and being at the campus again. Definitely enjoy the time here. And also I remember my days when I was doing my MBA and the long nights that we would spend here. So it was definitely a great time. And just recently I got an opportunity to speak at the class of 2023 ring ceremony. And it was an amazing experience, and also being and walking on campus. It's always a reminder of the education, the students, my friends, and also the professors from the university. So just always a great time.
I'm happy to hear that, you're kind of getting that sense of reminiscing, right? Being back here on campus for a lot of alumni, they've described it as surreal, right? It's, for some students, they're like, oh, well, I was just here a few years ago. And for others, they're like, it's been a decade since I've been here. Mm-hmm. And things have changed and everything. Now, earlier we were having a conversation before this, off camera. We were talking about some developments that had happened around here. What things are new to you here on campus?
Yeah, so actually, I started working for Greater Northside Management District in 2012, and the university, only the business school was here. So the School of Technology had not been built, and the Wellness Center had not been built. So to see how the campus has evolved and it's continued to grow, and even some other things that happened were the B-cycle stations, the hike and bike trail connections, and even the gators. That was something new too. But it was really nice to see a lot of the identity and growth of the university and branding to show that, hey, you guys are here and continuing to grow.
Yeah, I just can't. The thing is, right, I went to the University of Houston, and if you've ever driven by it, you see that they're under construction all the time. Love my alma mater. They are always under construction. There's always a closed road, if not multiple, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that when I got there, or no, even before I got there, when we were touring the university, I think in high school, the person that was touring us, someone who had graduated there, one of the teachers at the high school was like, yeah, so much has changed, and they just added those new dorms and this, that, whatever. And then I get there, and I'm like, okay, well, now they've added a new garage, and they've added this, and the law center's bigger, and so on and so forth. It feels like these universities are just constantly growing to someone's convenience, not the students, I'll say that much. But it is a beautiful thing to see after the fact, the development.
Yeah, and actually that brings up, I think when I was, so I graduated from one of the North Forest Independent School District's high school, Smiley High School, and when we were touring schools, I was in the criminal justice program, and we toured UHD, and it was just the main campus. The business school wasn't even in existence around that time too. So just to see the growth over the years, and I don't even remember the other buildings across the street if they even had those, but it definitely made an impact to see how everything has been really successful for the university.
So you got to see it when it was just the one main building.
One building, that's it, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, there's been just so much growth since then. If you don't mind, I'm going to pivot a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know a little bit more, and if you don't mind sharing about your educational journey, because if I remember correctly, the UH system wasn't your only home.
Correct. And actually, when I graduated high school, I got an opportunity I got a full ride scholarship to the University of Texas at Austin. It was a great opportunity I couldn't pass up. I do remember getting a lot of acceptance letters from the universities here in Houston, but when they said full ride, it's like, let's go for it. When I graduated in 2006 from UT, and then I worked in government for a few years, and I moved back to Houston, I actually did an entrepreneurship class at the University of Houston. That actually led into a few other opportunities as well. And then when I was looking at doing my MBA, UHD just came to the top of the list, and I did the program in 2017, and it was in supply chain and logistics. And I graduated in 2019, so I did get a graduation versus right before COVID.
Yeah.
So I did get the graduation, so that was an amazing opportunity. But what I really enjoyed about when I was doing my MBA program was that as I was learning, I was able to use the information and everything that I was learning in my day-to-day job and then also my family businesses. So I was able to do all of that at the same time. So I think it was one of those things that I was glad that I did it later in my career versus right after graduating college, because I was able to implement and have more day-to-day experience on some of the things that we were talking about. So when the professors were talking to us about a contract or this and that, I could relate because I had already been with my work experience, we had been working on some of those things. So I think that one-on-one was a little bit better versus if I would have just, coming out of graduating getting my bachelor's, I don't think I would have gotten that same experience. So yeah, it was an amazing. So I'm always telling people when they're thinking about MBA, go to UHD.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the promo. Love
Always,
that.
always.
That. I want to say that is a really interesting perspective that you bring up in terms of being in your field for a while and then working on your MBA while also working, which is not an uncommon thing.
Yeah.
But being able to relate in that way whenever you're talking about different topics. Everyone's path is different, and graduate Senator Bobby Stokes says life is not linear, right? So everyone goes through life in a variety of ways. But to hear that that's the experience that you had really does make me wonder, maybe is that the way to do it?
I think for me, and early on, entrepreneurship has been something that's always been in my family. We have a few small businesses. So I always knew that I wanted to do something, either if it was my bachelor's in business or my MBA. But I think that when I was were giving those assignments, I felt like I could relate because I had just experienced that. Or, oh my goodness, force majeure, I need to add it to the contract because what if another disaster happens? Then I need to add those things to our contracts. So I think that was very pivotal for me, that it was not necessarily, even though I did the hybrid program, it was also hands-on that I felt that I was getting from the university because of those experiences that I was going through as well.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. If you don't mind me backtracking just a little bit, you mentioned you did a entrepreneurial program at the University of Houston main campus.
Correct.
Was that the SURE program?
Yeah, so I was part of the first class in 2013.
Whoa!
Yeah,
okay, a lot of firsts.
Yeah, so that was actually a pivotal moment to know that I could do business plans for my family businesses, but also because I work for the management district, I work with a lot of business owners. And they're always saying either I'm coming into the area, I want to open a new business, and I would say, hey, do you have a business plan? Or these are some ideas of how you can get that project going. And then even the businesses that are here, it's also what are some of the ideas or next steps that you can do to continue to grow. And then, of course, with my MBA, strategizing, that came out of the MBA of how to make sure to strategize to make sure that there's always growth. And even performas and a lot of those things, I learned them here. So that was a really pivotal time for me as well.
It sounds like you really had the opportunity to develop, because we all do a level of, to a certain extent, this level of critical thinking.
Correct.
But it feels as though you kind of learned the questions to ask, how to go a bit further, maybe more than the next person, and really see a business grow and develop and be able to figure out those plans and, like you say, those strategies in order to develop longevity, right?
Correct.
And that's a huge thing. I noticed, well, if you don't mind, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, but I did a little bit of LinkedIn snooping.
Anytime.
And you've been with Greater Northside Management District since 2012, 2013-ish.
Yes.
So a little over a decade. That's amazing. That's an amazing accomplishment. I'm curious. Deputy Director is your newer role.
Correct.
But before that, you were a specialist program?
Director of programs.
Director of programs. Yeah. Would you mind digging into both of those roles for me, starting off with your former?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I do want to also start off that when we were talking about the university at UT, I ended up doing an internship at the governor's office. When I did that internship at the governor's office, I loved it, enjoyed it. I remember they were just paying us like, I think it was like $7. And for me, it was like, oh my goodness, what's this money? But that internship really opened up the doors. So definitely, I always recommend internships. Try to do them because they help. So I loved it so much, I ended up going back, doing another internship with them. And they, in 2006, when I graduated, in 2000, they called and said, hey, we don't have a position open right now, but we really liked how you worked. Could you come in just as a preliminary, like they had a position, just sort of like a starter position, just to come in and then we'll go from there. And that's exactly what happened. It started growing into just a small research position to research specialist 2 and 3, and just kept growing to eventually I became one of the managers, one of the lead in the program. And with that, working under constituent communications, I was able to work with so many different departments under the governor's office that actually got me to work with economic development, with education, with a lot of policy issues, transportation, a lot of those things. So then around that time, I was actually, because of my family businesses, one of them is inside of Greater Northside Management District, which is a reception hall. So we have a reception hall that's included, it's in the district boundaries. So my boss had been reaching out to businesses and gone a hold of my email. And my parents were like, no, we don't know anything. Just call Anibeth and here's her email. So I was getting the listserv from Greater Northside Management District, and I was like, oh my goodness, you guys are doing amazing. I'm glad of the things you're doing with the businesses, but I live in Austin. I would love to be involved, but whenever I'm here on the weekends. And that's how I started building a relationship with my current boss.
Wow.
Of saying that I was interested in just what you guys are doing. And then she called me about a few months later and said, hey, there's an opportunity. I do remember you said you wanted to move back to Houston eventually. Can we talk? I was like, okay, let's talk. And that was 2012. And then I was very intrigued about what I was going to be doing, that I said yes to the opportunity, and it was literally a phone call. That's how I built the relationship, from email, phone calls. So then for Greater Northside Management District, my first job was Director of Programs and Special Projects. And what that entailed was I managed all of our programs from graffiti abatement, litter abatement, also public safety with our officers. And special projects involved anything and everything from community cleanups, events, special events, the tour of the Northside that I mentioned earlier, those sorts of things. Like, it involved that. And as my role started changing, we actually started adding more infrastructure projects, but gearing up to them. So anywhere from Adopt an Esplanade to getting ready for Pocket Park to right now, as my role changed to more in continue to do some of those projects, but more in a management role. Actually, now I do infrastructure projects as well. So I'm currently going to be working on a street project called the Quitman Street, and it's bidirectional bike lanes. It's lighting new sidewalks, and it's going to be from Houston Avenue going all the way over towards Hardy and Elysian. And it went from a $1.9 million project to a $6 million project. And I think a lot of those skills that I've learned over in my career, from the beginning and working in the Capitol, the governor's office, to now, has gotten me, and even with my MBA, has gotten me to be able to do a lot of the conversations, negotiations, partnerships, to continue to grow our projects and leverage a lot of our funds. So it's been an amazing journey.
I say this a lot during the interviews. Whoa.
Yeah.
And I mean that in like the best way, right? Like there has been quite like the arc from working at the Capitol and just being kind of beloved there to being in Austin for a while and then like, hey, come down to Houston, make a change.
Yes.
And
yes.
changes you've made, changes you are currently in the process of making, and I see that you continue to make.
Yeah.
Thank you, because the thing is, the thing that I think a big thing that Houstonians love to do is complain. We do like to complain about like, oh, why is this set up this way, and so on and so forth. But there's someone that's out there helping make like big decisions, and it's not about if city planners, right? If they could design things out and they could predict way into the future and determine how things are going to be, then they would do that, right?
Yeah.
But it's really kind of, I feel like a game of catch up and trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do for the way that things are now? How are we going to improve this for the people that are here, the people that are coming constantly here to Houston? And just I just want to say, I mean, if you don't hear it enough, thanks for taking a brunt of such a large workload.
And I think for me, it's also I do want to say that it's decisions that we help with or that we are involved in. It definitely helps with a lot of it involves a lot of collaboration, partnerships, and my experience working in government in the past also helped with we have to be working with a lot of the state legislators, with the commissioner's office, city officials, and a lot of that we can't do it alone. You have to have these partners. You have to have collaboration. And I think one story that I do want to mention is that the first week or two that I started with the management district, my executive director said, hey, there's this meeting with Harris County Flood Control, and it involves Hawes Bayou. And that's actually some of the conversations we were having before, she offered me the position. Mm-hmm. She's like, hey, you know a little bit more about it. You should attend that meeting. I was like, okay. So again, just started with the district. And I remember going to this meeting, and it was probably a table like this, just full of maps and just everything. And it showed the area where, the area where I grew up and the area that I grew up coming to. And as I'm looking at these maps, they're talking about Hawes Bayou and what they're going to do. And then I'm looking and there's a few X's, and they're on commercial properties. And of course, working with the management district, we work with property owners, commercial property owners. Yeah. So that's who we cater to. Those are our constituents. So I get there and I was like, oh my goodness, the X's, and then I'm looking closer and I was like, that's my parents' business there. So then how do I do it? How do I do it in a way that I'm diplomatic? Because yes, I'm here representing, and at that time I was still director of programs. I'm here representing the management district, but then I'm also representing the livelihood of my parents. Yeah. That's their only business, And so I went around and I started talking to some of the elected officials that were there and some of the representatives from flood control. And I said, hey, can we talk about this section? And they're like, yeah, what's going on? I was like, well, if you look at this business, and there was actually a grocery store that just closed, but they were revitalizing it to a flea market. And I was like, they're about to open. I know that they just got all of their permits through the city. And the reason they're going to be successful is because HEB just bought out a property down the street on Little York. And now it's going to be, instead of the flea market, it's going to be the new Mi Tienda concept. That was the Mi Tienda concept of the shopping for Latinos. And but those people are going to be displaced, and this is where they're going to go. And that's when one of the guys that was there, I forgot his name, he comes up and he's like, yeah, I've heard that story too. They're going to about to open up. And I said, hey, in this business, I didn't say who it was, which was my family business, has been open for so many years. and they're doing great. And then I just kept going and just talking about all these businesses and their stories and how many years they've been open. And then another guy comes up, one of the leaders, and says, "She's right. Let's look at these areas in the back. There's more vacant land back there. Let's go ahead and acquisition over there." So they literally during that meeting took off the X's of all of the businesses off of 59, and fast forward, that was 2013. Those businesses are there and still working. So those decisions that we make can be pivotal for years to come. It's not necessarily, sometimes it could be right then and there, but then some of these decisions also help for the next generations and for the years to come.
That's massive. That is definitely like long term for a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now there's hike and bike trails and everything over there too. So it's an interesting, I think, story because it was the first time that it kind of merged both of my lives together.
It's intersectional.
Yeah.
It's absolutely intersectional. And it's kind of great to see how those two parts of life can merge together. And I think especially because, a lot of students here at UHD, right? A lot of students here are say first generation, they've got family businesses, they've got so on and so forth. And it's like, they want to go into that new corporate arena, field, industry, so on and so forth, but they also don't want to forget the roots, not pay homage to where they come from and everything. Mm-hmm. And I think the story that you're telling gives a beautiful marriage between the two, and being able to respect where it is that the hand that feeds you, and also being able to respect going into this brave new world, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think for being first generation, it was also one of those things that I didn't have someone to tell me, "Hey, this is what you should study in college." This is, if you study this is what you will be. I'm glad that I did psychology and pre-law because I was a criminal justice student in high school. It was an amazing degree. It actually helped me to be, as far as how I communicate with people, or how, even in management, it helps me in a lot of those things of the psychology and the pre-law. Even in the pre-law, I work on different contracts within not just the office, but even with all of our partners to get some of these projects going. You have to have contracts, memorandum of understandings, and interlocal agreements, and I think a lot of that really helped. So I would definitely always advise, always study what you like, not necessarily what you think is going to get to you that career. Because psychology ended up, I pivoted from psychology. I never thought I was going to be in government. So then pivoted to government, and then, pivoted to government and economic development and project management. You have to do X, Y, and Z. So I actually play and I say, hey, I'm a wannabe planner, wannabe architect, wannabe designer, wannabe engineer, wannabe lawyer. But it's really because whatever you studied, you could do anything. It's just really the fact that you had to enjoy it, and then also you can use it or apply it to whatever career, even if it's government, corporate, or whatever career it is. It just has to be something that you enjoyed studying. Even like my MBA, I enjoyed it. And if you didn't enjoy it, then it's not the right degree for you.
You make a compelling point, and I'm happy that you shared that. I want students to know that information about do the thing that speaks to you, because again, and I don't say this in any kind of negative way, many of our students, and let me say not many just UHD, but many students in different institutions that I've visited, been a part of in one way, shape, form, or another. Right, they'll go to where they believe the money is, right?
Correct.
And there's nothing inherently, I guess, wrong about that, because the thing is wanting to provide, wanting to be there, wanting to give back. All of those things make perfect sense. The goals are there for the right reasons, 110%.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think that you gave an excellent demonstration of how the thing that you want to do can lead you into the things that you need in life. Right, you can very much so provide, very much so give, very much so be there and make changes, monumental and very pertinent changes, just by doing the things that you like to do, the things that you enjoy. And that kind of leads me into my next question. which was, I think I've got the answer to it, but if you want to go into a little bit more detail about it, because I was really curious, again, the LinkedIn snooping thing, of how you went from psychology degree at UT to working for the government, and what kind of inspired that jump from like psychology degree at UT to like research and everything like that.
Yeah, so I'm very data driven, and sometimes I can get Excel sheets, when it comes to those things. And even when I did my MBA, oh my goodness, like the things that you could do forecasting. What? Yeah, so like I love data, but what data does. When I was at UT, I worked for a few psychologists. One was a cognitive, and one was a social psychologist, and it really showed that data really helped in understanding people and understanding what they're going through, but then also how very small things can help to change, and also make sure that there's buy-in. So like, for instance, when it comes down to in government, in order for some of the legislation or some of the bills to pass, there has to be community buy-in sometimes. And that's when I first started seeing the data-driven in the constituent communications department that I worked for. We were getting calls, letters, you name it, and actually emails. During that time, a lot of the email systems started coming through that it really helped to say, is the governor going to support this bill, or is the governor not going to support this bill? And the reasons being is that this is the amount of constituents from the state of Texas that reached out and said, yes, they love this, no, they don't love this. And it was data driven. So really some of the decisions were based also on data. And so I think that's when I started learning that in government, I could also do that research in psychology, but then also working with people. And then as I started working with more and more departments, that relationship building. So whenever the governor or staff could not be at events, how were we going to be able to show representation? And how we did that was either sending merit letters, sending certificates, sending different documents, and it was always a way of a presence of the government being there, that we care, we appreciate what you're doing, or you got this award, or you're doing this amazing event, and then we're here. And then seeing that in the economic development, working with the businesses, and seeing how we were celebrating 100 years of open business, like Mary Kay. Oh, I remember working on those documents for Mary Kay. She's from Texas, and working on some documents with her Secretary of State. It was just amazing opportunities to show how Texas is driven by businesses. And in order for the economy to be the way it is, the businesses have to be successful. So that's where the small businesses was a pivotal moment that I learned at the governor's office, that it's like, hey, I wanted to continue to be in this economic development sector because they are the engine that helps Texas run. And at that time, in the family businesses, we actually opened the reception hall in 2005. But before then, my parents had been, my father had an air conditioning company, and during the economic downturn, that was one of the things that's like, what are we going to do? And that's when they said, we want to open a small business. And the reception hall idea came up, and we opened around that time. So then also the reception hall is also that opportunity that I was also helping, coming back and forth from Houston, Austin, to help with the family business. So it was one of those things that I was learning these things, but then it's like, how do I update the website? How do I think we only had Facebook at that time, and then Instagram, like, how do I do all these things to make sure that they continue on their small business? But at that level, when I was at the state, it was for the whole state of Texas. But then moving over into the management district, even though the district is 24 square miles, we have thousands of businesses in this area. So keeping up with a lot of them has been amazing, hearing these stories, how they came up with their concepts, but then seeing how some of the decisions that are made in government actually help them, or help continue to grow. Then those are some of the things, or even the efforts that we do. It's pivotal to help that instead of a building looking full of graffiti or with illegal dumping, and us coming in and doing some of the abatement, the building looks nicer versus just being abandoned and nobody wants to look at it. And then when you clean it up, then someone's like, hey, I want to open a tax office there. Hey, I want to open a coffee shop there. Then it, pivots over into a different realm.
Yeah, wow, the way in which things can really kind of like turn around with, well, I would say a great effort, right? And the fact that like you all kind of came together to make all of these kind of like changes happen. You started off, like I mentioned earlier, like psychology, found out that you were very, very data driven, wanted to be able to make those changes, and you did just so.
I think also the data too, when you're talking about data, right now, for instance, some of our public safety efforts, for instance, how many extra job officers we hire is based on data. We actually look at crime analysis, LexisNexis, and we say, hey, these are some of the areas that, and working with Houston Police Department, figuring out, hey, these are the areas or these are the times that crimes are happening. How do we, pivot the officers to be in those areas, those times? Data is important for those sorts of things. And then another one right now, we're working on what's called a Thrive Initiative. And what it is that there are businesses that are in the area, but some of them are not using some of the marketing help. And what happened is during COVID, we saw that a lot of businesses have to pivot. And then how do we give them some help to pivot in a way that they use marketing or they use workshops to continue to grow? And it's all data driven. It's all showing the statistics in the area. And even like, for instance, if a new investor developer comes to us and says, hey, I want to invest in your area, or I want to look in your area, they're looking at data. They're looking at traffic patterns. They're looking at cost of living. They're looking at education. They're looking at all of that data in order for that to come. So data is very important for economic development, public safety, beautification efforts, for everything. So to be able to use my psychology in that way, yeah, that's why I become the research nerd.
You mentioned so many different, so many different projects that happen, right? So many different things for which you have data and things that you present to different like folks that make decision makers, right? You shared with us already an amazing story, and I'm curious, when it comes to like introducing things to different people, like again those policymakers or the folks that make those decisions. Sometimes you have people that are like, yes, I'm all for it. Sometimes you get pushback. I'm curious, given like your tenure in your current position and the work that you've done even prior to that, has there been like one instance where you've been like, wow, that was just a major success. I'm so happy that happened. And if so, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, actually, there's two that come up to mind. Actually, one, I was doing my MBA here, and the city of Houston said there's this a vacant property. We have no idea what to do with it, but at that same time, my executive director and a local artist, Ms. Rose Toro, they were actually talking about, I want to do an artwork project. And at that same time, there was also a nonprofit saying, hey, I have funding from, we're looking at some funding from the Houston Arts Alliance. Can we talk? Let's figure this out. And it went into, as I was doing my MBA, we ended up getting a grant from the nonprofit and then also the Houston Arts Alliance to be able to do a pocket park project on this abandoned park that was owned by the city of Houston. They hadn't done anything on the property for a couple of years. It was part of another project that they were working on. And as I was doing my MBA, I was learning about how to do the bid process, how to hire, to actually, before you hire the project consultant, you had to do sort of a scoring card to see if they met all the criteria, have judges, and then go into the contract. So everything as I was learning it, I was also doing it.
Oh my goodness.
So it was just an amazing, amazing time that it was like, I can apply this right now. Okay, let me apply it now. And then fast forward a couple of years ago when we did get funding for our equipment project, that project actually, people started hearing about it and saying, hey, we're also working on this, this, and this. And then that's where the idea came up of like, how do we partner up? And to your point on the data, I had to show them this is how much the project will cost. These are some of the things that we can do together. But then also, where will we come in to do that partnership? And it was literally Excel sheets, data showing cost, to the point that actually helped with some of the negotiations and the partnerships to say, hey, the city will come in and do these parts. Metro will come in and do this part. And then we'll come in to do certain parts of the project. And then also Commissioner Garcia's office with Precinct 2 also said, hey, I'm going to come in and give you guys funding to be able to do more on the project. So that's how that project went to smaller to a bigger project.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's actually in the bid process right now. So I'm in the bid process for that project.
Oh,
so
okay.
now it goes into construction management. So my role has been, and I think that's why I've enjoyed my job so much, that my role has changed over the years as I keep growing.
Change, metamorphosizes, all of that good
Yeah.
stuff. Just to be sure, that information you shared with us, is that public information?
Yeah, it's public information.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go on our
Excellent.
website, Greater Northside Management District.org, and it's on there as well. And I'll give you that flyer as we leave today. I'll give you that flyer as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have more of a, I just want to hear your subjective opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
Something that we tell students all the time, every time, and this isn't to influence your opinion on it, because I really want to hear from your experience, right? Something we tell students all the time is like network. You know, it's like real estate, or location. My question to you is, basically, how true do you find the statement? It's not what you know, but also who you know.
Yeah. For me, being first generation really, it was one of those things that you could either use it as a bad thing or as a good thing. For me, I said, well, if I don't know how to do these things, I need to ask for help. And at UT, I joined an organization called Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. I'm actually still a member. I even in 2017 to a few years ago, I stepped down, but I even helped with bringing the Houston chapter here to the state. And I joined the organization because I needed to learn how to do an elevator pitch, how to network, how to meet people. And really that actually helped as well, that I didn't know how to do that because my parents or family didn't teach me those things, or I didn't even know what the word leadership meant until I joined that organization. I was like, oh, I'm a leader? I didn't even know this. So doing that and being a part of organizations, for instance, Alumni Association, the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, any organizations, actually, even there's a few others that I've been a part of that has actually helped in making sure that I know how to network. And even now, even in my job, we have to network a lot. It's so many people that you meet, but then it's also how do we collaborate? How do we partner? Just last night, I was at the Houston at the bike summit at St. Arnold's, and I hadn't seen a few partners in a little while, and then we were already talking about projects. We talked about the tour of the Northside across the street and having the festival and how we're going to partner up, how they're going to come. So that's importance of networking, that you're going to be meeting people that you'll be able to not only be working with as far as partners, collaboration, but then you'll also be meeting people that, hey, it's sort of like when I told you the story about, meeting my boss. That's my job. It became a job later. It could even become the people that you meet can become your next board position that you're in, your next job, those sort of things. But then the importance of that networking also helps in making sure that you build that trust that is needed, and that authenticity, that being authentic, and the trust that you need in order to get some of those projects and some of those ideas done. So I'm a big proponent on networking. Another one that I'm a big proponent on is just growth development. So always continue to look at ways of reading leadership books or reading or going to professional development events so that you can continue to grow. Because I think if I hadn't been doing all those things, I don't know if I would have been in where I am now, because I've always been working on improving myself. And those professional developments, reading those books, like I'm a big proponent of John Maxwell, reading a lot of his books. Like, you can't climb Mount Everest without a great team, or you can't do this project without having a great team. You can't, like those are some of the things that over the years I continue to try to instill in anybody that I meet, but even, my coworkers, anybody, just to make sure that you always continue to grow.
I want to say that I never cease to be amazed by, every time I bring in a new person, I feel like I just learned so much more.
Yeah.
And I feel that, the impact that even in this moment, this is networking. This is networking.
Correct.
Right now, what's happening.
Yeah.
Getting to have this experience and learn so much from of course I'm learning it, but hope the students ideally are learning it as well. This is such great information. Thank you for sharing this information.
Yeah.
It's good to hear. Honestly, my last question was basically going to be something along the lines of, the networking that has transpired since you've been in your current position. But from what I hear, it's a lot of networking.
Yeah,
has
and
transpired.
actually, one that has just come up is, and actually, it's an alumni that I mentioned to you earlier. Ms. Maria Montes reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's a board position that just opened up, and it's for the Leland Turs." And when she told me, she's like, "Hey, you grew up in that area. Would you consider it?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not sure." And then, but she was doing it for a reason. She saw who I was, but then also, because I grew up in that community, that's actually where I went to high school. She was saying, "Hey, you could actually impact." Fast forward 2 years later, I'm on the tours, and I'm able to make some of the similar decisions, but in the community where I, went to school, where I grew up, and I think that all comes down to networking. It's who you know, but it's also who you put yourself in front of. It's not necessarily just because you know that person or so and so knows that person. You also have to show up. If there's an organization that interests you, go for it. Go to the meeting. Go to the event. If there's a subject matter that interests you, go to it. So, for instance, for me, if there's something dealing with real estate, I'll attend a certain meeting because that's something of interest. Or like I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship. I signed up for that class and it was amazing, and it also melded into my work. So sign up. Just sign up. Look at. I actually do a lot of podcasts. I'll listen to podcasts. Definitely read a lot of those books, but then attending those events will actually will also get you to the funny story to go to these amazing events conferences or galas or this and that, and it's because of the people that you've met over the years. So and LinkedIn is a big one. Please do LinkedIn. That is a big pivotal moment, because there's also times that opportunities come up from somebody that saw something on LinkedIn like today. So those sorts of things are also helpful.
Yeah, I just want to say, as in reference, I ended up finding you through the fact that either you had posted or someone had posted of you and reposted something that you mentioned about the ring ceremony, and I was like, oh my goodness, I need to get her on to the podcast. LinkedIn is a great proponent of just sharing kind of the wealth of information and finding out about new people and things they do, and opening yourself up to opportunities. I am hoping that we can get a list of some of those podcasts so that we can share them with the students, so they can dig into that. What is it? I think a combination of knowledge and motivation are a big thing that kind of help people do more. Sometimes it's that those are the podcasts that get us through late nights working, or really pushing ourselves to be better than who we were yesterday, right?
Correct.
So I would love if we could get a list of those.
Yeah, and I think that the podcast, bringing up that conversation, and even just other organizations that I belong to, it's also, how do you share your story? And as we're talking here, I've shared where I came from, my story, but then it's also that moment of that you realize it's how do you summarize your story, and literally during that ring ceremony, and I'll definitely email it over to you, but it was one of those things that I said, "Hi, I'm Anibeth Turcios. I am first generation, first to graduate high school, first to graduate college, first to get my MBA, and then also first to have work with family businesses, entrepreneur, investor, like my list, project manager, my list goes on. And it's sort of that moment of I am all of these things, but all of these things needed to happen. And networking and teamwork, all of those things are a big proponent of who I am today. And definitely the university has been pivotal in a lot of that as well.
If I could, not to, what is the word? I don't mean to make it too simple, but if I had to use one word to describe you in this moment,
Yeah.
I'd say an inspiration.
Oh.
not just to me, but also hopefully to the students that see this. You had potential, and you put it through a catalyst, and you just amplified it a million times over.
Yeah.
And you're doing great things.
Yeah.
And
there's more to come.
There's more to come. That's the beauty.
Not done yet.
Yeah, absolutely not. I feel.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for it. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and that's why I would say to everybody that listens, I would definitely say write down your story. As just recently when I did that for the ring ceremony, it was that moment. I was like, oh, this is when I became an entrepreneur. Oh, this is when I became a project manager. This is when I became this. This is when I became, those things. And as you're writing these stories, you also realize a lot of things happen in your life, but it happened for a reason. But then you also have to put work into it. As the university says, you got to put grit. You have to put grit into it.
Grit. Absolutely. I think, honestly, in terms of questions, that's going to wrap it up for me.
Awesome.
I just want to say, Anibeth, thank you so much for coming
thank you
here.
for the opportunity.
It's been just a pleasure speaking to you. I feel like I've learned so much.
Yeah, anytime.
I feel like I'm going to go home and rewrite my whole life.
Yes, do it. And I'll give you that speech, the one
do.
from the when I did the speech for the Pan American Roundtable.
Excellent.
And that was actually full circle because the Pan American Roundtable gave me scholarship when I was in high school. They found me again through work. Actually, I found them again through work for a networking event. That's how I found them. And then now it's our 8th year giving a scholarship to a young Latina student through the Pan American Roundtable. But then to be full circle and get that achievement, I was just like, wow, I went from, the 18-year-old getting a scholarship to now I'm standing here telling my story to everybody and here's another scholarship for another student. So it was just a full circle moment, and I'll give you that speech. So
excellent. Thank you so much.
No
I
problem.
want people to just gather as much information as they can.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure. Oh, and is it fine if we put your LinkedIn in the description as well?
Yes, you can put my LinkedIn and then Instagram, Anibeth Incorporated. That's my tag handle.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anibeth.
Business.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much.